Joining us on the show today as we take a look back at the PDP presidential primary and what the opposition party needs to focus on next in the build-up to the 2023 election are Abubakar Baraje, former National Chairman of the PDP, and Arise News analyst Sam Amadi. Welcome to the morning show, sirs. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, viewers.
Good morning. Well, Sam,
yeah.
Amadi, it's good to see you again, and Atiku Abubakar, I'm so excited to see you again after such a long time. I saw you on TV at the convention.
Yeah.
But let's start the discussion.
Yes, doctor. How have you been? It's quite sometimes, yeah. But I always see you, and I'm always greeting you on the Arise News every morning.
Anyway, Sam Amadi, a question each for both of you. Sam Amadi, I mean, you've done quite a number of commentaries on this primaries process, both before and now. You are here to comment after the PDP National Convention. What's your assessment on both sides of the aisle, PDP and APC, and all the issues that came up about the influence of godfathers and governors, about the monetization of the process, violence in some parts, displacement of some incumbents in some states, and all of that. And then the concern, generally expressed about Section 84(8), and the failure of the president to give his assent up to this moment. Some people say, including your good self, that is a problem. But some people say, well, it's good that we don't have too many delegates. Makes the process a bit more manageable. And then to you, Abubakar Baraje, well, your great ally, Senator Bukola Saraki, he was at a point chosen along with Governor Bala Mohammed as a consensus candidate of some northern elders. But at the end of the day, he came a distant third with just 70 votes. In the original permutations, the expectation was that he would do even much better than that, or even perhaps win. What do you think happened? And what is he going to do now? Is he now going to support the candidate that has emerged, Atiku Abubakar? Because when Atiku Abubakar was giving his acceptance speech, we saw him standing there right beside him. Let me start with you, Dr. Amadi.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Ruben. Let me start by saying, picking up the last conversation with Dan Wanyango. My view is, I want to talk about, first, the fact that INEC may have done this in good faith, but as a former regulator myself, it failed the regulatory test. So we want to make that very clear, that decision basically damaged or affected unfairly one of the competitors in the game. So INEC, for future action, INEC should not just consider the efficiency of its action, but their fairness. Fairness is critical for regulation. It can't allow a party to bring their delegates, make some cost, make all the plans, and on the eve, you change the deadline. That would have allowed PDP, for example, to deal with the issues of Ebony. Now, PDP, after the show, is cancelling Ebony and trying to reset Ebony. If they had that time, they would have postponed, for example, and sorted out some of those crises. So for next time, a regulator's primary job is to be fair and seen to be fair. The talk about exigency does not justify such blatantly unfair decision at the last minute. Now, to move straight to the other issue, I think first, let's commend PDP for putting up a very good convention in terms of the structure. You can see, when you enter there, you see that you have to travel through, so the controlled flow, the controlled issues around maybe hooliganism or the disruption of the event. It was well scripted. I think former Senate President did a great job with his team to create, and it looks like maybe a smaller melodrama, the aerodrome venue helped in making it a much more orchestrated, managed event than the Ego Square. So maybe for future, we should look at that as a better venue. Then to the substantive issues around the convention, we talk about dollarization. Obviously, money played key role in the sense that there was, as usual, expected so much free trade of currency and votes. And again, the build-up before that. But at the scene, EFCC were there. They were searching, based on tip-off by some activists who wrote to EFCC. I saw, even myself, my laptop everybody was searched. So maybe not much exchange happened on the site, but previously it has happened. And the question is, how do we really track this? Nigerians like moral outrage. Moral outrage will not solve the problem. I think there's a failure on the part of EFCC and INEC to create streamlined guidelines and create processes to deal with monetization of voting. There's nothing wrong about spending big on elections. Elections supposed to logistics, media work, all kinds of things, but really open buying of delegates or even suggestion about that is both criminal and damages the idea of agency of voters and, of course, the whole notion of democracy. Again, it has impact for macroeconomics. In 2 days to that event, we saw that the Naira value, there was a shift. And also, it will damage confidence in our democracy. Again, when you look at the ratings, they always call us hybrid because of some of these issues of process. So I think we should, INEC and EFCC should be much more focused on really dealing. And if they have the will to do that, everybody knew about this buying of delegates, giving them money. The hotels are clear. They could sweep in. They could plan people. They can watch and deal with that. I think that's important. Now, the real outcome, in terms of what shaped the outcome, I think it was clear, really, that last-minute dealings around what to make out, whether Wike should be the candidate. The issue is, it was clear with the way the issues around Kano, late-night judgment from Kano, which the secretary to the party received around 4 a.m. of that day, the change in Edo, other changes suggested clearly that, except there was a step down, it was obvious that some degree of possibility that Wike would have won that election. And I think that maybe the party leaders had some bad feeling. Apart from geopolitics, some people will say, the notion of whether he is the kind of candidate who can win the election is very important. Again, don't forget, delegate election is easy to win because once you pledge that 774 voters, they pledge to you, or whoever manages them, whoever owns them, pledge to you, then you can win. But that doesn't translate to capacity to win the general election. And so that probably will be at the heart, at the mind of the late-night deals that people made. By 5 a.m. on that day, we already heard about stepping down prospect. It was still being negotiated, being fought back. But when Governor Tambuwa stepped up for the second time, I knew that the game was up. And I overheard the chairman of Edo APC, or functional chairman, whatever, and then, speak, the national vice chairman South, Tambuwa has killed us. So basically, this is the game of swords, the game of bayonets, last minute. But the way I look at it is that the 774 delegates, smaller number, made it easier, really. First, the counting was simple. The process of voting itself was very transparent, difficult to rig. And again, the question is, should we have the 3 delegates back? I think at this point, we shouldn't have them back. There's 2 things that this has helped us to do. The outcome may be wrong, but the process will now create a sense in which people will go back to always contest for the delegates. The only problem that remains that INEC didn't come out too early with guidelines around this. And again, INEC should be much more interventionist in looking at how these ad hoc delegates emerge. In some places, national delegates, there was no voting, proper voting. Some kind of elders came together and chose who represent them. And so if we can leverage on the new Electoral Act and strengthen internal democracy, and maybe each of these parties conduct their selection of delegates like the US do over a period of time, 2, 3, 4 months, and then each state, each zone, we watch out, and people will have the greater scrutiny, transparency, and involvement of the people. I think it might help us more than having party leaders, so-called statutory delegates, play key role. In the US, statutory delegates play key role because the party process are well streamlined. Everybody knew who would be what, and most of them are not going to be bought over or swayed by who is the governor, who is the president, or swayed by any other inducement. They are statutory delegates because they are part of the party's institutional memory. They are part of the party's policy direction. And so this constitution of policy and the framework of party have overweighted votes because they will steer the party towards the direction that the party conventional has been. But in our own case, where the party structure is protein, it keeps changing, the implication that the ad hoc delegates you give statutory super delegate status do not have may not have any institutional connection or memory, and therefore are not serving the greater party or the greater benefit of the party, might be serving ultimately for the circumstantial benefit of a particular leader at that point. So I think that in our evolution as a democracy, this makes sense, yeah. It's better to have this smaller number, but all of them elected through the democratic process.
Okay, at this point, let's go to Alhaji Abubakar Baraje. What happened at the convention, and particularly with your candidate, your aspirant?
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Abati and the House. Well, nothing extraordinary actually happened to who you refer to as my candidate, but the candidate of PDP as well, anyway. Like I said to other media outfits that day, on the day of the convention, all the candidates are members, solid members, of PDP. What I mean by candidate, I mean all the aspirants, that came to contest were members of PDP, not only ordinary members. They were key leaders of the PDP, including Dr. Abubakar Saraki. And the expectation of any candidate going to the convention was to win the election. Definitely, that's the expectation of every contestant and aspirant. So, but we all know that as many as they may be, only one person will come out victorious. Strategies, horse trading, talks, intrigues, like in any part of the world, will characterize politicking. And that's exactly what happened. And so when you have all these factors coming into play in politics, definitely it will assist one person or a group of people, contestants, while it will negatively affect others. Probably those that did not win on that day fell into the category of those people that suffered the negative consequences of intrigues and plays that came to play on the day of the convention. But that's notwithstanding, political situations like that, it comes and goes, and it's like a lesson for whoever participates, even the onlookers, those of us who came there to watch, including the delegates that are involved in voting. So they are all part of the experiences and lessons that you garner for future operations and administrations of politicking. So what happened, like you said, particularly if you want to know about Bukola Saraki, to me, is part of experience. He's an experienced politician. He's come a long way from being a special assistant to the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, to being a governor, to being chairman of a governors forum, to being a senator, to being a Senate president, and now trying his hands to become the President of the Federal Republic. He has gathered enough knowledge and enough experiences to serve as a buffer for him against any eventualities. It's not, and I repeat, it is not anything very strange to him, and strange to us too as well, other than experience for a next time. So that's the way I see it.
Well, thank you, sir. We all live to fight another day, don't we? Well, I have two questions for you both. I'll start with you, Alhaji Baraje. And my question for you is based on today's front cover of This Day newspaper, positing on possible vice presidential picks for Vice President Atiku Abubakar, your presidential candidate now. This Day has shortlisted Governors Okowa, Udom, Obaseki, and Anyim Pius Anyim. I'd like your take on those picks and whoever else that you might, have in mind. What direction do you think PDP should go with in terms of the vice president, in terms of zone, in terms of credentials, and how to surmount, a lot of real deep disgruntlement from the southern parts of the country who had hoped that PDP might have zoned the presidential slot to the southeast. And for you, Mr. Amadi, I mean, Nigerians are excellent at gallows humor. There have been all kinds of jokes and memes about the delegates and what have you. But what does this exercise say about the caliber of people who have chosen, who we then get to elect?
Let me just take it. Let me take it one by one. In coming to the situation of the vice president, the choice of the vice president. Yes, let me just take it one by one. It seems you seems to be in a hurry, and I know there's no time, but let me just take it one by one. You see, the choice of a vice president, like the choice of or the election of the candidate in our party, the PDP, the choice of the vice presidentship is so easy because we have a tradition. If the president comes from one part of the country, definitely the vice president will come from the other part of the country. In other words, now that the election is gone and over, the candidate of the PDP, Atiku Abubakar, the former vice president of Nigeria, is now flying the flag of PDP and is from the northern part of the country. Definitely the vice president will come from the southern part. It could be the south-south zone, it could be the southeast zone, it could be southwest. But the tradition is that the vice president will come from the south. All the people that we have mentioned, the governor of Delta, the governor of Okowa, the governor of Akwa Ibom, Governor Udom, the governor of Edo, Governor Obaseki, and the likes, they are all capable. They are able. They have enough credentials. Their resumes are very sternly. And any one of them could be the vice president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Like I told you, we have a tradition. And part of the tradition is that the elders, the stakeholders, the organs of the party will sit down and talk, discuss and dialogue where the vice president will come from. And of course, it will include the views of the candidate of the party. And then we will take into consideration the schedule of the vice presidentship and the role he will have to play in ensuring that we salvage the country that has gone into abyss for quite 7.5 years now. So we will put into consideration many other factors in choosing the vice president from the southern part of the country. And the process has started, if you must know. We have started consultations, we have started talking, and we have started looking at the direction that will favor not the party only, but the entire Nigeria as a whole. Concerning the complaints, it is normal, and you agree with me that it's part of the process of electioneering, that after elections like the one we held day before yesterday, there will be other people who will have one complaint on the other, and who will have observations that are not pleasant to them. We have set up, the party is setting up organs and committees to deal with such issues as usual. And elders of the party are looking forward to playing a very key role in this situation. And in course of no time, as usual with PDP, everybody will be on board. And the road to capture, to rescue Nigeria has already started and it to be completed in earnest. So we have no problem. If you are talking about the situation of the convention, particularly the issue of the national delegate, like I said on that day, it is a very nice experience. It's a new experience. To some of us, it's an experience that has stepped up the participation of some members that were regarded as underdogs before. Now coming into light, giving room to more participation of people from the grassroots and bring people to gain more experiences about politicking. That's a very big advantage. It also has its own economic advantage. If it is properly handled, and that is bringing down the cost of running conventions. However, like you observe, I will agree with you, and I agree with the last speaker, that a lot of money went underground, and it's not healthy for such activity, for such politics in that situation, to induce people to vote with money. it's part of the disadvantages that you can have with a lesser number. With the former system of having everybody or a lot of number, about 4,000 people to come out and vote, if it had come up in that way, probably it might lessen the way people or money will fly around. But that notwithstanding, I think it is the responsibility of every one of us, both the aspirants, the candidates, and the delegates. Not only that, the parties, the political parties, the law enforcement agencies, and the graft outfits to come together and work with INEC, the supervisor of electioneering in Nigeria, to kill the very bad attitude of monetizing elections. It is a very bad one, and many of us who are leaders of this party are meeting and putting heads together on how to eradicate that cankerworm. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. I was actually asking, I'd asked you your question. I was asking the question to Mr. Amadi. So, Mr. Amadi, if I may continue, I really want to stress the role of delegates, which has launched 1,000 memes, and we're all laughing because we're accustomed to gallows humor in this country. But I want to talk about where Alhaji Baraje just left off, the role of money in politics, the sort of malignancy of that, and how we can actually begin to curtail that. What we saw with the delegates was really quite disgraceful. It calls to mind the 19th century New York kingmaker, Boss Tweed, who said, "I don't care who does the electing as long as I do the nominating." It appears that there's a disconnect between who gets to win elections and who is actually right for governance. How do we bridge that gap, and what should happen going forward? And also on election day with vote buying, we saw EFCC showing up at the venue, the MKO Abiola Stadium, with their jackets and what have you. But in practical terms, what does their presence mean? Who will be prosecuted? We've heard all the jokes or reports about politicians going after delegates after they lost, demanding their money back. Should people be prosecuted? What do we need to see to sort of sanitize this whole experience?
Well, thank you. Very important question. But let's start first by saying, look, if you look at the history of corruption around the world and how you can stem it, it's actually top-bottom. Democracy is bottom-up, but fighting corruption is top-down. So what that means is that, look, the ruling party has to now set the standard. The president and the agencies have to come out clear. If there's a conflict here, many of we are taking for granted that election has to involve buying of votes. So you don't see a lot of the public office holders are not scandalized. The agencies that are involved in controlling corruption are not scandalized. So the first thing is to first agree that this is not just about who wins election. This is actually injurious to democracy. The disconnect between election and governance. Well, it's a historic crisis globally. Some leaders emerge, they're popular, but they don't have the capacity to solve the social problems. But it's actually much more aggravated when the political process that throws up leaders is such that doesn't pay attention to comments and analysis of issue. Pius Anyim raised that issue very well at the convention after the election. He says he's disappointed that the election did not reflect the issues that Nigerians face, the issue that the party flagged. Because I was there, I was watching when they did the closing speech, the delegates didn't care. The delegates had already made up their mind where to go. The delegates had already been paid to do a particular job. And so you watch the whole speech, especially from the female contestant who did a great job, or someone like Odom, who also had a great argument. Nobody really paid attention, and the lady didn't even get one vote. So what this means is that, look, we can go back and rejoice that we've won and we've lost, more that we have lost, but the system lost. What can we do to control it? First and foremost, the regulators are not setting out rules. That's the problem. You see, law, we have a law that says this is how much you can spend in an election, in the Electoral Act. But you have to step it down to guideline for the parties for bookkeeping. You have to step it down for providing regulatory rules about aspirants. So in the US, before you aspire, you do a filing to the Electoral Commission. That filing, you start that day recording contributions from your supporter group, and recording expenditure. So you see two ledger. Somebody says, on this particular month, I got this amount of money from these various contributors. And then another one says, this is how we spent it. to lobbyists, to our strategists, to our consultants, to media houses for placement of adverts. So if you don't create that very process of bookkeeping, constrains how you spend money, not just buying delegates, but also how money is laundered. Again, this is a country where we are fighting terrorism. We don't have a framework. The Constitution says that we can't even finance campaigns with foreign contribution. But do you have a framework that guides party officials to know, flag which one is illicit funding for campaign? So what we are suffering from is totally low level of democratic administrative law processes. These agencies have not developed the paperwork, the process to guide behavior and constrain them. And therefore, you can track. If you don't have paperwork, if you don't create process, you can't even track these contraventions. Now, back to the notion of buying the delegates. The critical issue here is that if there are tracking, detection, prosecution post-primary, the deterrence effect is that both the party leadership themselves and the contestants, there will be a new norm. People just develop new norm. It will evolve. People just know that, look, this is the way to go. And therefore, we look for what else we can do to get voters supporters, whether we appeal to primordial sentiments, whether we appeal to ideology, whether we appeal to their leaders who will bring them out. So we create some kind of principal-agent relation. All over the world, delegates and voters don't have complete rationality. We talk about bounded rationality. They either respond to ideologies, they respond to ethnic or identity issues, but in Nigeria, they respond to cash. And that's too primordial and too pedestrian. And again, dangerous. It fits direct to corruption. And so we are looking at a process of electing our leaders that will feed into a process of governance. So when we now have corruption writ large in public leadership, we should be able to trace it to electoral process. So I think this is now a national emergency, that INEC, the EFCC, the central bank that controls supply of money, everybody should come together and draw out clear framework and commit to that. It doesn't matter whether the losing party loses the election, the president and these agencies should come straight and say, look, we want to shoot down the role of naked money. We're not talking about funding for campaigns, for consultancies. We're not talking about other, disguised way of getting people to support you. We're talking about outright daylight bribery, authorized, so it seems, by the political system, by the political leadership of a country. That's really a stark violation of the Constitution and the rules, and exposes us to a lot of economic and social harm as a country.
Okay, so I'll come to you, Mr. Baraje first, and afterwards I'll come to you, Mr. Sam Amadi, on this. Don't you think that the people have been left out, and this is going to lead to massive voter apathy? Because the people are looking, they are seeing on TV how the electoral process has been dollarized and monetized. And these people say, oh, this is not our will, this is the will of the dollars. The dollar will, that's what it reigns in Nigeria today. It's who has most dollar that spends it. So don't you think you are annihilating the people that over the years have been dropping out of the process? I mean, when you compare the number, 62 million Nigerians are here, voted in the 2003 elections. Now, we struggle to get 40 or 30 million Nigerians to vote in the last elections, and subsequent elections, they are not going to vote. The Nigerian people are not interested in all this shenanigan happening by politicians. So what do you say as regards that? I'll come to you first, sir.
Yeah, well,
and afterwards I'll come to Mr. Sam Amadi.
To a large extent. Yeah. To a large extent, I'll agree that it is a practice that is very derogatory, blatantly and openly, flying dollars and naira around because of elections, and in a country we say we are fighting corruption. It is very disturbing. I'll agree with you, and that will lead, to other vices. As a matter of fact, rather than apathy, I see voters coming out en masse, knowing and thinking that they are going to get monetary reward if they come out to vote. Mm-hmm. That is the danger. And so when you go into electioneering with this kind of tradition, what you have is not a true reflection of the people's wish, but a true reflection of purchase of the conscience of the voters. And don't forget, this is a country that hunger is reigning supreme. Poverty is at its elm. And so when you dangle a small carrot in front of such people that have been so depressed as a sort of hunger and poverty, the tendency is that you can buy them easily. That is the fear that we have as a result of what took place, which is very, very dirty for our society. So I see more people coming out to vote, but not with sincerity, rather than to take money and then, vote in the direction that may not be have a positive consequences for the country. It might go in such a way that it might inflict more injuries, not only into the economy, but to the social, progressive, and advancement, environment of the country. In what sense? Yeah, and in that case, therefore, I believe it's a matter of concern, which we, the leaders of political parties, should sit down to think hand in hand with, the law enforcement agencies to eradicate. That's my view. And I think it's also led to a situation where a kind of last minute surprise, unpleasant surprise of, the candidates withdrawing for each other is entertained. It's a consequence of money. It's a consequences of corruption. And I think that too should be addressed, not only by political parties, by other agencies that are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Mr. Sam Amadi, your take on that?
Well, I think you talk about voter apathy, and interestingly, Alhaji Baraje has brought the reverse, that this could actually be a motivation for voters to come out and grab their money. So either way, it's dangerous. Now, another thing that we can see for the ruling party and PDP is that a third party candidate who discounts money, who runs as an antidote to a dollarized politics, like a P2B or any other of those, or even a Kwakwanso or whoever is going to run, could actually cause a major shift. You see, the politicians run a risk once they delegitimize their process and create so much cynicism around their good faith. They're taking for granted that because Nigeria is a poor country and they have weaponized poverty, they take for granted that there could be no shift. We've seen in histories across the world that when people are down, like we are in Nigeria, very poor and brutalized, not just poor, and the political process is not responsive to their issue. To be frank, this campaign so far that concluded for the primary, there was no serious engagement with the crisis of governance, the crisis of livelihood, the insecurity, the near almost collapse of the state in all the campaigns. Maybe one or two people raise this issue just because everybody is cynical about how to grab power. So if this continues, the major parties will suffer some major loss of supporters, even as they go to the rural areas and buy the poor and hungry folks. They will lose the middle class. They will lose the professional class. They will lose the civil society class, the media, the Twitter class. And if they lose them, then you have a government that if you win with maybe rural folks who are stronger, who are more in number, but then you lose the legitimacy that this organized professional class provides. So I think it's a lose-lose if we continue in this direction. Yes, it's true. It can spur more motivation to come out and vote and collect the money in a loaf of bread. But essentially, it will create a process where a third-party race might have something like maybe the major party wins with 55%, but you see a third party getting up to 30%. And maybe that will have a knock-on effect on our democracy so that in the next elections, we begin to see how this disenchantment feeds into enthusiasm for an upsetter who will come and upset this status quo that's not delivering. So my fear is, look, the ruling party, the PDP and the APC should sit down and re-motivate voters with messaging, with better communication, and de-emphasize this cynical use of money or other inducement to win votes. If they continue that way, it might be that they are setting up for a revolutionary change. And really, I think maybe there's time for that because they're not delivering on responding effectively to the challenges of governance and the huge disappointment of the people feel about. They're just treating it cavalierly. They just pay no attention. And the notion of buying these voters without caring about what they care about, which is a livelihood, it's the highest level of cynicism. And again, I think it's dangerous for the parties. It's also dangerous for governance in the short term. But in the long term, it might create a revolutionary pressure that will have us see a third-party challenger who ultimately win the presidency and maybe reset things in a way that the two parties may not like.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Sam Amadi, and thank you very much, Alhaji Abubakar Baraje.